Fortunately, some are born with spiritual immune systems that sooner or later give rejection to the illusory worldview grafted upon them from birth through social conditioning. They begin sensing that something is amiss and start looking for answers. Inner knowledge and anomalous outer experiences show them a side of reality others are oblivious to, and so begins their journey of awakening. Each step of the journey is made by following the heart instead of following the crowd, and by choosing knowledge over the veils of ignorance, and thus begins their journey of illuminating the darkness. Welcome back. As always, we can be reached through our Facebook page and through our website at www.illuminated-darkness.com. All information presented is solely for entertainment and informational purposes and are not the opinions of the producers. And as always, no copyright infringement is intended. We always hear about these clandestine military operations on the news after they've occurred and been declassified and examined and re-examined and studied and complained about. But we never really know why. We never understand the purpose. And our government does that. They have a tendency to think, oh, they're stupid. They're never going to figure it out. But with a little time and a little research, you can figure out why, what for, and how come. Operation Timber Sycamore was a classified weapons supply and training program run by the CIA and supported by some Arab intelligence services, including Saudi intelligence. Launch date is a little sketchy, either 2012 or 2013, and it has supplied money, weapons, and training to Syrian opposition militias of the Free Syrian Army fighting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the Syrian Civil War. According to U.S. officials, the program was run by the CIA Special Activities Division and has trained thousands of rebels. President Barack Obama secretly authorized the CIA to begin arming the Syrians in 2013. The program didn't become public knowledge until 3 years later. One consequence of the program has been a flood of U.S. weapons, including assault rifles, mortars, and rocket-propelled grenades, into the Middle East black market. Critics saw it as ineffective and expensive and raised concern about the diversion of weapons to jihadist groups and about Timber Sycamore-backed rebels fighting along the al-Nusra front. In July of 2017, U.S. officials stated that Timber Sycamore would be phased out, with funds possibly redirected somewhere else, or to offering rebel forces defensive capabilities. The next brilliant idea was Project Gunrunner, and this was a project of the ATF intended to test the flow of firearms into Mexico in an attempt to deprive Mexican drug cartels of weapons. Now, the primary tactic of Project Gunrunner is to detect straw purchases and unlicensed dealers to prevent illegal guns from entering the black market. Between 2005 and 2008, 650 cases involving 1,400 offenders and 12,000 firearms were referred for prosecution. However, other tactics, such as gun walking and controlled delivery, have led to controversy. In early 2011, the project became controversial when it was revealed that Operation Wide Receiver under the Bush administration and Operation Fast and Furious under the Obama administration had allowed guns to walk in to the hands of Mexican drug cartels. The ATF allowed illegal gun sales in order to track the sellers and the purchasers who were believed to be connected to the drug cartels. Nearly 2,000 firearms were illegally purchased for $1.5 million. In 2010, 2 weapons linked to Fast and Furious turned up near the scene of a murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry in the Arizona desert.
Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Open up your hate and then open the mate. Get up, come on, get down with the sickness. You mother, get up, come on, get down with the sickness. You fucker, get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Madness has now come over me.
Operation Sea Spray, September 20th of 1950 to September 27th of 1950, the United States Navy released 2 types of bacteria from a ship offshore of San Francisco, believing them to be harmless to humans. Based on results from monitoring equipment at 43 locations around the city, the Army determined that San Francisco had received enough of a dose for nearly all of the city's 800,000 residents to inhale at least 5,000 of the particles. Now, on October 11th, 1950, 11 residents checked into Sanford Hospital in San Francisco with very rare, serious urinary tract infections. Although 10 recovered, Edward J. Nevin, who had recently undergone prostate surgery, died 3 weeks later from a heart valve infection. The urinary tract outbreak was so unusual that Stanford doctors wrote it up for a medical journal. None of the other hospitals in the city reported similar spikes in cases, and all 11 victims had urinary tract infections following medical procedures suggesting that the source of their infection lay inside the hospital. Cases of pneumonia in San Francisco also increased after ceratomarcosis was released through casual relation has not been conclusively established. The bacterium was also combined with phenol and anthrax stimulant and sprayed across South Dorset by the U.S. and U.K. military scientists as a part of the DICE trials that ran from 1971 to 1975. There was no evidence that the Army had alerted health authorities before it blanketed the region with bacteria. Shock. Doctors later wondered whether the experiment might be responsible for the heart valve infections around some time, as well as serious infections seen among intravenous drug users in the 1960s and 70s. So apparently, according to our government, we are nothing but guinea pigs. There again, shock. Now here's a fun one that got people all riled up, and this was Operation Jade Helm. Ran across multiple U.S. states, 1,200 personnel, 4 out of 5 branches, and was called a Joint Exercise in Realistic Military Training. It was sponsored by the United States Special Operations Command and included the Army Special Operations Command, Joint Special Operations Command. Took place in Texas, Arizona, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Utah. Now, the stated purpose was to improve Special Operations Forces' capability as part of the National Security Strategy. Coordinated and led from Eglin Air Force Base, an Air Force Material Command base, which was in Northwest Florida. Mainly, this was Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Air Force Special Ops troops, plus infantry, Marine Corps Special Operations, Marine Expeditionary Units, and the 82nd Airborne Division. Troops engaging in the exercise assumed roles of either occupying or resistance forces. Most locations were considered to be sparsely populated regions of the United States near small towns. Some participants wore civilian attire and drove civilian vehicles. Journalists were not allowed to embed in the operation, but the Texas State Guard and civilian groups monitored the exercise closely. Then we come to the FEMA death domes. Some have alleged that the new dome-shaped facilities that were being built by FEMA were for the purpose of detaining insurrectionists. Many Jade Helm conspiracy theorists latched on to the idea of the so-called death domes, though purportedly hurricane and storm shelters that can protect a large number of people and in some cases provide community facilities such as gymnasiums. Conspiracy theorists argued that the walls that were designed to withstand hurricanes and tornadoes, which occur so frequently in Texas, made great prisons, and they linked them to Jade Helm, rightly or wrongly. Bluebell ice cream trucks, and here's where it gets even stranger. Conspiracy theorists believe that Bluebell trucks could have served as mobile morgues. People said they found evidence of this with a film of about a dozen Bluebell trucks traveling on the same highway as a military convoy, apparently on Interstate 25 in Colorado. Bluebell closed its Denver area distribution, which was near I-25, in May of 2015, the same month that the video was posted. Now, granted, Fort Carson, Colorado, and the military base there sits about 75 miles down I-25 from Denver. The company had said that the convoy convergence was a coincidence. Bluebell had been reeling from a recall and production shutdown following discovery of listeria in its ice cream. 3 deaths were linked back to that outbreak. Still, many conspiracy-minded websites and individuals called the company's first ever recall suspicious and the truck's proximity to a military convoy creepy, while also linking the company to the Bush family and defense contracts. But no one could ever verify whether the trucks were preparing to be mobile morgues or not, or just merely moving the ice cream from one freezer to another. And what's a conspiracy theory without throwing Walmart in there? Always low prices on basis for martial law. The world's largest retailer became an essential element in any Jade Helm conspiracy theory and website. This is because a handful of Walmarts, 2 in Texas, 1 each in Florida, California, and Oklahoma, suddenly closed in April for 6 months. The company said they needed to make plumbing repairs. There were actually 2 different groups with conspiracy theories which note that city's officials in the city said Walmart wasn't filing for permits, and according to a Florida ABC affiliate. One group expressed doubt is organized labor. Some of the closings were allegedly punitive and retaliating measures against workers who wanted better wages and rights, something that Walmart's been convicted of doing everywhere. But Jade Helm theorists remained unsatisfied with either answer, and 5 out of more than 4,000 U.S. stores, in addition to the razor wire protecting the roof of an abandoned Walmart in Cincinnati. And let me tell you, the area of Cincinnati it was in is not a nice place. It is a high crime area. And that was put up to protect the copper and HVAC equipment that would be stolen. Jade Helm theorists say the military plans to enact martial law use the soldiers as police and the stores as processing locations, or possibly to control the food supply in poorer areas. There was also a theory that involves China using the sites as command centers, and it allegedly ties to replace the dollar as the global currency with its own and disarming Americans during a hostile takeover. Now, some say Armageddon predictions, religious groups, they say that Jade Helm was in preparation for an asteroid strike, and it seems like about every 6 to 12 months, Facebook is saying that NASA is saying that there's an asteroid coming. And their batting average is still 0. They're persistent, I'll give them that. Now, some believe that Jade Helm is preparation for an asteroid strike that'll wipe out all life on Earth. Well, why are we bothering if it's going to wipe us out? The theory goes that eventually the world ender will be discovered by the population as the asteroid nears, and the military will be used to corral everyone and keep anarchy down and possibly force people to do what they think needs to be done to save humanity, or just to make the last few weeks of life on Earth less like the Lord of the Flies and more like North Korea. Others see it as Russia to the rescue. Independence-seeking Texans, recently incoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, called Russia the biggest threat to the U.S. But some Jade Helm theorists suggested that Russia was going to swoop in and save the day to arm the rebels in Texas in response to the U.S. arming rebels in Ukraine and other countries in Russia's backyard. In fact, some said Russia had already infiltrated the U.S. to help prepare for the Civil War. Okie dokie. An alternative to this theory is the U.S. is pretending Russia is arming an American rebellion in order to justify a declaration of martial law. Apparently, the U.S. government was using conspiracy websites to initiate the spread of the lie that Russia is trying to start a civil war in Texas as a part of false propaganda. Another angle said that Russia is in a secret allegiance with President Obama. This one suggested that foreign troops will actually run the FEMA camps imprisoning dissidents, a theory complete with a Russian invasion. Another conspiracy that went along with Jade Helm was that Obama was going to use it to make sure there was never a 2016 election. They said Obama'd use this to impose martial law, become a tyrant, and use a military that largely disapproved of his overall performance as commander-in-chief. Now, I remember Jade Helm, and poor old Alex Jones lost his shit over this. Jade Helm was occurring when Alex Jones was making his movie Police State 4, which is actually a pretty decent documentary film, and it points out a lot of things that'll make you question a lot of things. Next up on our list is Operation Gotham Shield, which occurred in 2017, and it was an exercise conducted by the United States Federal Emergency Management Agency, which we all know as FEMA, to test civil defense response capabilities in the event of a nuclear weapons attack against New York's metropolitan area. Gotham Shield occurred over the course of 4 days from April 23rd to April 27th, 2017, a part of FEMA's National Exercise Program. The operation involved a hypothetical ground burst of a nuclear device at the New Jersey side entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel, resulting in hundreds of thousands killed and injured persons, 4.5 million refugees from the initial blast, and subsequent fallout. Due to the location of the simulated attack, the operation scenario assumed the disassemblement or destruction of FEMA's Region 2 Regional Response Coordination Center, which required transfer of command functions to the Region 5 Regional Response Coordination Center. In the final phases of the exercise, a hypothetical massive influx of refugees from the attack overwhelmed the resources of neighboring states. So it was a practice run, and in this day and age, it's a good practice to run. Now, what kind of scared the hell out of most people is the fact that it looked like there was a bunch of soldiers there. This was not the case. This was National Guard assisting. What most people don't understand is that the National Guard is basically a state's standing army. They are controlled by the governor. The governor's the one that can control them out. Now, they can be federalized if necessary. For example, a friend of mine just got back from 18 months in the southwest part of the United States working Border Patrol. He's in the Ohio National Guard. They were sent to assist. So don't always jump to conclusions when you see the National Guard. It may just be something local that they're assisting with. There was also Joint Task Force Empire Shield, and this is an element of the New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs, partly responsible for the military defense of New York City, and primarily the deterrence and prevention of internal security threats. It's composed of personnel from the New York Army National Guard, the New York Air National Guard, and the New York Naval Militia. Joint Task Force Empire Shield was activated in response to the September 11 attacks. As of 2009, New York was spending $16 million to maintain Joint Task Force Empire Shield, but by 2011 this had grew to $19.5 million. In 2018, the proposed budget for Empire Shield was $33 million. Empire Shield is composed of 3 ad hoc companies, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Personnel are volunteers drawn from the New York Army National Guard, New York Air National Guard, and New York Naval Militia, who are placed on state active duty status. In 2017, the force had authorized, but not actual strength, of 500 personnel. 3 companies rotate between 3 mission assignments: Quick Reaction Force, a puppet mission, and training cycle. The Quick Reaction Force fulfills the National Guard Reaction Forces in New York City, which provides combat units designated to respond to an incident ahead of federal assets with the capability to be logistically self-sustaining for 72 hours. Pop-up mission elements, meanwhile, conduct preventative patrols of New York transportation hubs, including Penn Station, Grand Central Station, JFK International, and LaGuardia. Joint Task Force Empire Shield also conducts random patrols of the Indian Point Energy Center and nuclear power plant in Buchanan, New York. Joint Task Force Empire Shield is headquartered at Fort Hamilton, which is, this is a good thing to have. There again, if you have an all-out attack from an enemy, the first thing they're going to aim for is your infrastructure. your power grids, your communications, your manufacturing. Our next operation is Operation Hot Musket. Alleged operation that recalled troops from their leaves to be deployed in the United States. Now, the info was conflicting. Some sources state that it was an operation to prevent immigrants from illegally crossing into the border, drug trafficking, gun runners, terrorists, and human trafficking. It was actually Operation Faithful Patriot, a domestic deployment and civil contingency operation at the U.S.-Mexico border. It was conducted in order to prevent a potential border crossing of migrants from Central America, comprised of 5,000 U.S. soldiers, 2,000 National Guard troops. So that was the point of that. Everyone said Operation Hot Musket was a rehearsal for martial law. Operation Jumpstart, that was a military operation to aid U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced by President George W. Bush in May of 2006. The mission entailed the deployment of United States National Guard troops along the Mexico-U.S. border for the purposes of enforcement of border security and construction of a border fence. Rules of deployment were defined in a memorandum of agreement between officials in the Department of Defense and the governors of Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas, as well as Mexico. National Guard members involved in the operation were not involved in law enforcement activities due to the political and moral aspect of using troops on the U.S.-Mexico border. They were supporting U.S. Customs and Border Protections and U.S. Border Patrol agencies with administrative, observational, and intelligence gathering capabilities and civil engineering projects. By temporarily taking over these functions, Customs and Border Patrol were freed up and SWORD agents were sent to field units. Military operations with Operation Jumpstart were primarily to observe and report. The rules of engagement for the operation was very restrictive and only allowed escalation to lethal when met with an equal amount of force from another. The National Guard set up an entry identification team site to spot undocumented aliens. How do you spot an undocumented alien? Are they wearing a name tag? Many of the areas of the operation were in desolate locations. Some locations were so remote that troops were flown in sometimes by UH-60 helicopters. Now, I know that this is not our normal gloom and doom conspiracy theory podcast. A lot of these are legit military exercises protecting our country, our states. Hey, cool. But sometimes, we never know. Our government is not always forthcoming with information.
Waking up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on the prison bus. This is it, the apocalypse. Whoa, I'm waking up. I feel it in my bones, enough to make my system blow. Welcome to the new age, to the new age. Welcome to the new age.
Here's a fun one. Project Sunshine. In the 1950s, in an effort to study the effects of nuclear weapon tests, the federal government established a worldwide network to secretly collect tissue samples from more than 900 human cadavers. The body snatching took place in secret without notification or permission of the next of kin. In 1994, President Bill Clinton formed an advisory committee to investigate so that these government secrets didn't stay secret. The result was a 900-page report acknowledging the unethical and illegal actions taken during Project Sunshine. Illegal, unethical, the United States government? Say it ain't so. Next up, we have Operation Northwinds. In response to Fidel Castro's dictatorship and the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff circulated a memo on March 13, 1962, with the subject line, Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. In the missive, the JCS outlined suggestions to provoke Cuba, such as start rumors, many, sink ships near harbor entrance, conduct funerals for mocked victims, and blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. Days later, President John F. Kennedy rejected Operation Northwoods, and JCS Chairman Lyman Lemnitzer was denied a second term in office. This was the beginning of Kennedy's downfall, sadly. Here's another fun one, Operation Paperclip. A bloody conflict like World War II is bound to result in some government secrets, but this one is especially cringeworthy. Trust me. In August 1945, with the smoke of World War II still clearing, President Harry Truman approved the hiring of more than 1,500 German scientists, technicians, and engineers. One of them was Werner von Braun, chief rocket engineer of the Third Reich, and Walter Schreiber, the German Army's wartime chief of medical science, who authorized dangerous experiments on humans. To assure security clearance in the United States, the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency created false records for the scientists, many of whom were considered wartime criminals. Now, if it wasn't for von Braun, we would not have had our space program. However, with Schreiber, he helped create Plum Island, if you've ever heard of that. Tick-borne diseases. Some people say that Lyme disease is actually a biological weapon. And there were some missions that tested that, and we're going to get to those. Up next, we have Operation Mockingbird, and this is one you may or may not have heard of. In a plot worthy of an Orwellian novel, the CIA spied on two reporters between March and June in 1963 who, according to the agency, were disclosing sensitive material related to national security in the newspapers. The illegal activity noted in documents declassified in 2007 included wiretaps on the reporters' home and office telephones. The CIA noted that the project was particularly productive, identifying contacts of the newsmen, including senators, members of Congress, and other well-placed individuals. Well, you know, First Amendment protects that, and the CIA had no business doing it. Here's another fun one, Project Greek Island. This took place at the Greenbrier Hotel in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. Nice, big, luxury resort, but it's got a secret buried. Literally. It's a government bunker. And it remained a secret and was built in 1961. It's 544,000 square foot bunker. It has enough dormitories to accommodate 1,100 people, and it was function as a shelter for members of Congress in the event of a nuclear bomb. And it stayed hidden from 1961 to 1991 for 30 years, and it was revealed in the Washington Post and quickly decommissioned. So I wonder now where they're going to hide out while the rest of us are burning in a nuclear fallout. Next up, in the mid-1960s, during the Vietnam War, we had Operation Chaos. And this was because nobody approved of the war, so President Johnson and the CIA decided they were going to investigate the protests on college campuses throughout the U.S., and what they were looking for was foreign influences on the anti-war movement, particularly from our communist countries. For the next several years into the Nixon administration, the CIA agents went undercover to investigate organizations like Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Washington Urban League, and much to their dismay, they never found any communist influence, but found information and collected thousands of files on innocent individuals. Not to mention, this entire operation was illegal. The CIA is only permitted to legally collect foreign intelligence. It is not in their charter to do anything within the United States. Up next, we have Project Azorian. The 6-year project was one of the most complicated ones that the CIA had ever undertaken. Once again, they're operating inside the United States like they're not supposed to. In the late 1960s, K-129, which was a Soviet submarine, sank about 1,500 miles north of Hawaii, taking with it a trio of ballistic missiles. The CIA and Department of Defense realized this was a valuable opportunity to gain some insight on Soviet intelligence. So, like any good spy and military would, they began a covert operation to put together a massive deep-sea vessel with a mechanical claw that would lift the submarine more than 3 miles to the surface. They were only able to recover a single section of the submarine. And to really screw things up for the CIA, thieves broke into the company that built the ship, stole documents related to the project, and they eventually exposed the story, which in turn forced the CIA to give up their recovery attempt. Once again, what's done in the dark will be brought to the light. Next is Operation Gold, and this was considered the first CIA covert operation for the Cold War. Operation Gold was to tap Soviet lines of communications at their military headquarters in Berlin. Now keep in mind, at the time, Germany was still divided in half by the Berlin Wall, Eastern Germany and Western Germany, and when that happened, the Allies kind of decided, you take this half, I'll take this half. And it split Berlin right down the middle. The CIA, together with the British Secret Intelligence Service, wanted to access underground cables below the city. And to accomplish this, they ended up in 1954 digging nearly 1,500 feet of tunnel, which was precariously located just under a major thoroughfare. 9 months after digging began, the first taps were installed. But, once again, unfortunately for the CIA, a Soviet mole had become privy to the plans, and in April of '56, a Soviet maintenance team uncovered the tunnel, forcing American agents to vacate. In the 11 months that the tunnel was functional, they had monitored hundreds of thousands of conversations, so something good did come out of it. I have to laugh at some of this because it just shows you the lengths the American government is really willing to go to find out whatever they can. Now, granted, against an enemy, I get it, but there are some things that even I shake my head and go, okay, we were a superpower, and we reduced ourselves to this. I mean, come on. We are talking about a government that said, no, you can't have a Furby in your office. Next up is Operation Merlin. This took place in the late 1990s, and the CIA set out to hinder Iran's nuclear program, which they viewed as an increasingly dangerous threat. To do that, they decided to arrange for Tehran scientists to receive a nuclear blueprint that was deliberately drawn up incorrectly, and it wouldn't produce a working bomb. They gave the blueprint to Russian scientists who had no idea the blueprints were fake. The scientist passed the plan along, but he noticed that something was wrong and pointed it out. Well, if you're going to have someone deliver it, you kind of need to make sure they're on your side and know what the plan is. Next up, we have the weirdest of all government secrets from the 1970s, which was the Stargate Project. The CIA conducted a series of experiments in the hopes of unlocking the secrets to remote viewing. The process theoretically allows people to see or experience things that are far away by reaching out with their minds. Though the project was small, it only had about 15 to 20 participants. It lasted almost 20 years. The CIA wouldn't shut it down until 1995, when finally it was concluded that they hadn't produced any effective results. You know, some people, I'm not going to lie, there are things in this world that can't none of us explain. There's things in this world that some of us have seen that people think we're crazy when we talk about them. I think this is something that is totally possible, but I think CIA picked all the wrong people. Up next, we have Operation Vegetarian, and this was a 1942 plan conceived by the British military to drop linseed cakes infected with anthrax on German fields where they'd be eaten by cows and thus infect the civilian population. However, the test site in Scotland was uninhabitable up until the 1990s because, well, anthrax just doesn't go away. An operation that had some good come out of it was the FBI's mission Operation Rocky Top that was discovering corruption in the higher-ups of the Tennessee state government in the 80s. With the help of some first-year state representative, the FBI was able to arrest 50 or so people, including state officials, which led to 2 state officials committing suicide to avoid trial. Next is a rather important one, which is Operation Looking Glass, and this is a 24-hour-a-day, continuously airborne command center capable of directing all the United States nuclear assets as a backup should SAC's ground facilities be destroyed. Taking turns, the airplanes have stayed staffed continuously for 29 years. I don't know if they are still active, but I'll tell you one thing. With the way the current climate of the world is today, I sure hope them boys are still up there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Believe it or not, once upon a time, Iran was a democratically ran country with a democratically elected government similar to our own country. However, in 1953, CIA decided we didn't need that anymore, and they developed a plot, later known as Operation Ajax, to overthrow Iran's democratically elected officials. As part of this, the agents bombed the house of a prominent Muslim while posing as pro-government supporters. Iran's democratically elected leader was successfully overthrown, and about 200 to 300 people were killed. And then we turn around and go to war to what? Get free elections in the Middle East. Please allow me to reiterate, I'm very proud of my country. I am a patriot. I believe in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and that all men and women are created equal. But what I don't understand is our government and how they say one thing and do something completely different just so they can go in at a later date and set it back to how it was before they went in and screwed it up in the first place. From the mind of Winston Churchill, we got Operation Unthinkable. And this was a plan to invade the Soviet Union in a surprise attack immediately at the end of World War II. His plan was finally shut down when he learned that the Soviet troops remaining outnumbered Allied troops 3-1. Well, Soviets were built to work in their cold climate, and I'm sorry, some of our boys during World War II, unless you were from Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, or Canada, you were just not psychologically prepared for how cold it could get in Russia. Here's a fun one, Operation Kuwaiti Field Chicken. In 2003, the U.S. military planned to attach caged chickens to the top of their Humvees as they entered Iraq to act as an early warning system to any dangerous chemical or nerve agents. The operation was also dubbed Operation Kuwaiti Fried Chicken. And this is no different than the old coal miners using canaries to know when the carbon dioxide had become too much and they needed to vacate the area or die. Operation Infectation, a disinformation campaign run by the KGB in the 1980s to spread information that the United States invented HIV as part of a biological weapons research project at Fort Detrick, Maryland. However, the KGB apparently forgot about the Geneva Convention, which states you cannot develop a biological weapon. It is illegal. The Geneva Convention prohibits the manufacture and use of any type of disbursement device. This would include using a human as a disbursement device. Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night was a 1945 plan developed by a Japanese Army medical officer to wage biological warfare in Southern California on the civilian populations in the United States. His plan was during the final months of World War II to use plague fleas from Unit 731. Here's a fun one from the British intelligence, Operation Cupcake, and what they did, they hacked an online Al-Qaeda magazine and replaced bomb-making instructions with a recipe for cupcakes. Man, I hope they were good damn cupcakes. In 1954, an operation by United States Immigration and Naturalization Services to remove illegal immigrants, mostly Mexican nationals, from the southwestern United States. I won't say the name of this operation because I feel it is a derogatory racist remark. And back in 54, nobody really cared if it was derogatory or racist. Now, here's a pretty neat one, Operation Cornflakes, and this was during World War II when the U.S. ended up tricking the German Postal Service into distributing anti-Nazi propaganda. How'd they do this? Well, they dropped fake letters next to bombed mail trains, and when the Postal Service was recovering the mail, they'd confuse the false mail for the real thing, and it would get delivered. This next one's pretty sad, actually. Operation Cottage. Over 300 Allied casualties were reported during the invasion of an unidentified island named Kiska. Some of these were due to friendly fire, as Canadian and U.S. troops mistook each other for the absent Japanese garrison. Apparently, communications were not a strong point during World War II. As part of Operation Meeting House, the firebombing of Tokyo was the single deadliest air raid of World War II, which was greater than Dresden, Hamburg, Hiroshima, or Nagasaki, resulting in over 100,000 deaths. This was one of the single worst bombings in World War II. Operation Kaput, after the fall of France in 1940, Churchill launched this operation, and he ordered the Royal Navy to seize and or destroy French Navy ships to prevent Hitler from using them. In one British attack, over 1,200 French sailors were killed, and this ended up proving to the United States that Great Britain would resist Nazi Germany whatever the cost. I'm sure that aided in pissing France off even more. Here's one that's pretty cool. This is Operation Claymore. And a British soldier during World War II sent a telegram to Adolf Hitler. And he read, it said, Herr Hitler, reference your last speech. I thought you said whenever British troops land on the continent of Europe, German soldiers will face them. Well, where are they? Now, I can literally see this British soldier standing there going, all right, they're not here. He lied. Move on. Here's one that makes absolutely no sense, but this is Operation Paul Bunyan, and this included 60 U.S. troops, 64 South Korean troops, special forces, 7 attack helicopters, an array of attack jets, nuclear-ready B-52 bombers, and 12,000 troops on standby. For what purpose? To finish cutting down a tree after 2 U.S. soldiers were killed by North Korean soldiers. It's not funny, but it is, because if you need that much hardware to make sure a tree gets cut down, there is definitely an issue with your ability to do shit covertly. This one is rather sad for any animal lover. The CIA launched Operation Kitty during the Cold War. Their plan was to surgically implant bugging devices in cats to eavesdrop on Soviet communications. After all, who would suspect a cat of wearing a wire? The first mission actually failed after the cat was ran over, and the $15 million operation was dropped. That's tax money well spent, is it not? And yet more stigma attached to the Vietnam War. The CIA had a program called Operation Phoenix, and secretly, without trial, due process, or anything, secretly executed at least 20,000 civilians in South Vietnam who were suspected of being members of the Communist Underground. Here's another interesting one. This is Operation Flex, and an FBI agent in California pretended to be a radical Muslim. Members of the mosque quickly got a restraining order against him and reported him back to his employer, the FBI. Here's one that's kind of cute, and if you have any outstanding warrants and suddenly receive free tickets to a football game, you could be a part of another Operation Flagship. This was a sting operation that sent free Redskins tickets to wanted fugitives. The operation was a success, and it resulted in more than 100 arrests. Marshals were wearing Redskins and chicken costumes. Not to be left out of the secret operations shenanigans, during World War II, the Nazis formed Operation Bernhard. They planned to crash England's economy. They were going to counterfeit 132 million Great British pounds and drop it over England by plane. This would have been the equivalent to about 8.3 billion pounds today. World War II seems to have been the hotbed for secret operations. Britain came up with Operation Tracer, and this was a secret mission on the Rock of Gibraltar, where 6 men were to be sealed inside a cave in case the Nazis captured Gibraltar. They would monitor enemy movements after the rock's capture. Now, they'd have supplies to last them for several years, but there was no way out. And if you died within the chamber, you were embalmed and cemented into the floor. After numerous decades and rumors, the cave was seemingly rediscovered in 1997. The Germans also had Operation Pastorius during World War II, and it was for sabotage in the United States. It mainly failed because everybody was defecting and in danger of being compromised. And right from the start, one of the agents, when he was drunk, announced to the patrons of a bar in Paris that he was a secret agent. Good job, sir. Here's another fun one from the Kennedy area, Operation Mongoose. This is when the CIA tried to kill Castro with exploding cigars and shells, poison wetsuits, milkshakes, a former lover, character assassination, and the use of thallium to make his beer fall out. They also wanted to try LSD. Castro is quoted as saying, "If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I would win the gold medal." Up next, we have Operation Gladio, and this was the codename for the clandestine stay-behind operations, where armed resistance that were organized by the Western Union and subsequently by NATO and the CIA in collaboration with other European intelligence agencies during the Cold War. The operation was put into place for a potential Warsaw Pact invasion and conquest of Europe. Although Gladio specifically refers to the Italian branch of NATO stay-behind organizations, Operation Gladio is used as an informal name for all of them. Stay-behind operations were prepared in many NATO member countries and some neutral countries. As of July 27 of 1990, that operation had since been dissolved. We always hear about HARP and weather manipulation when talking about secret operations. How about Operation Popeye? And this was a military cloud seeding project carried out by the United States Air Force during the Vietnam War in 67 to 72. This program attempted to extend the monsoon season over specific areas of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and this was in order to disrupt North Vietnamese military supplies by softening road surfaces and causing landslides. And some of those older vehicles, you get them stuck in the mud, you might as well face facts. You're staying there for a while. The former Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, was aware that there might be objections raised by the international scientific community, but said in a memo to the President such objections had not been in the past a basis for prevention of military activities considered to be in the best interests of U.S. national security. They apparently didn't think that with the wind patterns, these seeded clouds would soon land over the United States. The chemical weather modification program was conducted from Thailand over Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, allegedly sponsored by Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and our friends at the CIA, without the authorization of the Secretary of Defense, Melvin Laird, who had categorically denied to Congress that the program was for use as a tactical weapon ever existed. Once again, the Cold War brings us Operation Ivy Bells, which was a joint Navy, CIA, and NSA mission whose objective was to place wiretaps on Soviet underwater communication lines during the Cold War. During the Cold War, the U.S. wanted to know more about submarine and missile technology in the Soviet Union, specifically ICBM tests and nuclear first strike capability. It was in the early 1970s that the government learned of the existence of the undersea communications cable in the Sea of Okhotsk, which connected the major Soviet fleet naval base at Petropavlovsk on, I don't speak Russian, some peninsula to the Soviet Pacific Fleet's mainland headquarters at, there again, I don't speak Russia. At the time, the sea was claimed by the Soviet Union as territorial waters and strictly off limits to foreign vessels. Knowing this, the Soviet Navy installed a network of sound detective devices along the seabed to detect intruders. The area also saw numerous surface and subsurface naval exercises. Once again, the CIA decides to play around in the Middle East with Operation Cyclone. This program was to arm and finance the Afghan Mujahideen in Afghanistan from 79 to 92, prior to and during the military intervention by the USSR in support of the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. The Mujahideen were also supported by Britain's MI6, who conducted their own separate covert actions. The program leaned heavily towards supporting militant Islamic groups, including groups with jihadist ties that were favored by the regime of Mohammed Zia al-Flaqi in neighboring Pakistan, rather than other less ideological Afghan resistance groups that had also been fighting the Soviet-oriented Democratic Republic of Afghanistan administration since before the Soviet intervention. Once again, the CIA can't leave it the hell alone.
Ooh, the storm is threatening my
Our next covert military act was Able Danger, which was a classified military planning operation led by U.S. SOCOM and the DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Agency. It was created as a result of a directive from the Joint Chiefs of Staff as early as October of '99. It was supposed to develop information operations campaign plan against transnational terrorism. According to statements by Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer and 4 others, Able Danger had identified 2 of 3 al-Qaeda cells active in the September 11th attacks, the Brooklyn cell linked to Blind Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, including 9/11 leader Muhammad Atta and 3 of the pilots and the 19 other hijackers. According to a 16-month investigation by the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee in December of 2006, Able Danger did not identify Muhammad Atta or any other 9/11 hijacker at any time prior to September 11, 2001. They dismissed other assertions that have fueled 9/11 conspiracy theories. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee first attempted to investigate the matter for the Senate in September 2005. The Pentagon ordered 5 key witnesses to not testify, according to the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman. He said, "That looks to me as if there may be obstruction of the committee's activities." An attorney representing the lieutenant colonel and 4 other Able Danger employees at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in September of '05 pointed out to the committee that his clients had been forbidden by the Pentagon to testify to the committee. He also discussed the Defense Intelligence Agency's decision to suspend the lieutenant colonel and his security clearance shortly after it became known that he had provided information to the 9/11 Commission on Able Danger. The attorney had said, "Based on years of experience, I can say categorically that the basis for the revocation was questionable at best." An investigation by the Defense Department Inspector General's Office in September of '06 concluded that the evidence did not support assertions that Able Danger identified September 11, 2001 terrorists nearly a year before the attack, that Able Danger team members were prohibited from sharing information with law enforcement authorities, or that DoD officials acted against the lieutenant colonel for his disclosures regarding Able Danger. However, some of the people questioned by the Inspector General's office claimed their statements to the Inspector General were distorted by investigators in the final IG report, and the report omitted essential information that they had provided. Lieutenant Colonel has claimed the DoD retaliated against him for speaking out publicly about the IG report's distortions. The Senate panel of investigators said there was no evidence that DoD lawyers stopped analysts from sharing findings with the FBI before the attacks. Analysts had created charts that included pictures of then-known al-Qaeda operatives, but none including Atta. The follow-up chart made after the attacks did show Atta. The Senate committee said the findings were consistent with those of the DoD Inspector General released in 2006. The program used data mining techniques to associate open source information with classified information in an attempt to make connections among individual members of terrorist groups as part of its original intelligence preparation for the battlespace. The objective of this particular project was to ascertain whether the data mining techniques and open source material were effective tools in determining terrorist activities, and if the resultant data could be used to create operational plans that could be executed in a timely fashion to interrupt, capture, and or destroy terrorists or their cells. Apparently not. Now, there are some people that will sit and say 9/11 was an inside job. Was it? I don't know. Was it not? I don't know. I have my own thoughts and opinions, and as you know, I try very hard to not share them or to push them on anyone. However, I do think that there was a reason behind it, but that reason may never be known. Now, if you're a fan of shows like Ancient Aliens or Unsealed Alien Files or anything else that has to do with aliens and UFOs, you'll recognize the name of this next operation. Operation High Jump, which was a post-World War II U.S. naval operation to establish the Antarctic research base Little America 4. That's the official word. However, the speculation and conspiracy theories say that the team was led there under Rear Admiral Ethan Larson to prevent the establishment of bases by the Nazis free in Germany. Alien and UFO theorists state there may be secret alien bases on the continent. That's where Atlantis is at. That's where secret alien bases are at. That's where secret weapons are at. But it's ironic because every country supposedly has signed a treaty stating that Antarctica would be used for research purposes only and would not belong to any one country. In 1954, the Israeli government had their own failed operation, Operation Susanna. This was conducted in Egypt in the summer of '54 as part of a false flag operation. A group of Egyptian Jews were recruited by Israeli military intelligence to plant bombs inside Egyptian, American, and British-owned civilian targets such as theaters, libraries, and American education centers. The bombs were timed to detonate several hours after closing time. The attacks were to be blamed on the Muslim Brotherhood. Surprise, they always get blamed for something. Egyptian communists, unspecified malcontents, or local nationalists with the aim of creating a climate of sufficient violence and instability to induce the British government to retain its occupying troops in Egypt's Suez Canal. The operation caused no casualties among the population, but did lead to the death of 4 operatives. Well, let's hear it for planning. 2 cell members who committed suicide after being captured, and 2 operatives were tried and convicted and executed by the Egyptian authorities. The operation ultimately became known as the Lavon Affair after Israel's defense prime minister Pinhas Lavon, who was forced to resign as a consequence of the incident. Maybe you should think things through a little bit there, pal. Before Lavon's resignation, the incident had been referred to in Israel as the unfortunate affair or the bad business, public cover-up. It seems to be a global government thing. Israel publicly denied any involvement in the incident until 2005, when the surviving agents were awarded certificates of appreciation by the Israeli president. In the early 1950s, the United States initiated a more activist policy of support for Egyptian nationalism. This aim was often in contrast with Britain's policy of maintaining its regional hegemony. Israel feared that the U.S. policy, which encouraged Britain to withdraw its military forces from the Suez Canal, would embolden the military ambitions towards Israel. Israel at first sought to influence this policy through diplomatic means, but was frustrated. In the summer of 1954, Colonel Binyam Gilby, the chief of Israel's military intelligence directorate, Amman, initiated Operation Susanna in order to reverse that decision. The goal of the operation was to carry out the bombings and other acts of sabotage in Egypt with the aim of creating an atmosphere in which British and American opponents of the British withdrawal from Egypt would be able to gain the upper hand and back the British withdrawal from Egypt. Apparently, Israel thought so long as the British was in Egypt, that Egypt would not mess with them. Now, if you have to back up a little bit to go back to Operation Paperclip, I'll understand, but let me save you the trouble. Third Reich Army Chief Medical Officer Walter Schreiber, who authorized experiments on humans, was a part of Operation Paperclip. So apparently he had a hand in some of these operations. This first one, Operation Big Buzz, was a U.S. military entomological warfare test conducted in the state of Georgia in 1955. The test involved dispersing over 300,000 mosquitoes from an aircraft through ground dispersal methods. The next one, Operation Big Itch, was also U.S. entomological warfare testing using uninfected fleas to determine their coverage and survivability as a vector for biological agents. These tests were conducted in Utah in 1954. Now, what is the purpose of these tests? Well, here's what you find out. The purpose of these tests was to use biological warfare. You take a bacteria or a virus, you infect a biting insect, fleas, mosquitoes, flies, ticks, whatever you've got available, and then you disperse them onto your enemy's army. the insect, animal, whatever, then bites the soldiers. They become infected with this virus, bacteria that they may or may not have a vaccine for or a treatment for, and you wipe out your enemy's army without affecting your own army. That is the whole purpose of Plum Island in New York. And some believe that Lyme disease, named for the town Old Lyme, is a part of that. Here's one for our environmentalist friends, Operation Davy Jones's Locker. And this was a U.S. and U.K. joint operation from 1946 to 48, and it involved dumping at sea all of the captured German chemical weapons following the end of World War II. Here's another interesting one, Operation Dew, which took place from 1951 to 1952 off the southeast coast of the United States. It included Georgia and North and South Carolina. Operation Dew consisted of 2 trials, Dew 1 and Dew 2. The test involved the release of 250 pounds of fluorescent particles from a minesweeper off the coast. Operation Dew 1 was described in a U.S. Army report known as Dungway Special Report 162, dated August 1, 1952. The purpose of Operation Dew was to study the behavior of aerosol-released biological agents. So Operation Dew 1 consisted of 5 separate trials from March 26, 1952 to April 21, 1952. They were designed to test the feasibility of basically mainlanding a large aerosol cloud released offshore until it drifted over land, achieving a large coverage area. This test released zinc cadmium sulfate along a 100 to 150 mile nautical range, approximately 5 to 10 nautical miles off the coasts of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. 2 trials dispersed the clouds of the zinc cadmium sulfide over large areas of all 3 states. The tests affected over 60,000 square miles of populated coastal region in the U.S. Dew 1 releases were from a Navy minesweeper, the USS Tercel. Dew 2 involved the release of the same type of fluorescent particles and plant spores from an aircraft. Dew 2 was described in a 1953 Army report which remained classified at the time as of 1997. The report by the U.S. National Research Council concerning the Army's zinc cadmium sulfide dispersion program of the 1950s is still somewhat classified. I have filed a Freedom of Information request, but I'm sure it'll be a long time before I hear anything back. Here's another good one, Operation LAC, Large Area Coverage. Yet another Army Chemical Corps operation which dispersed the microscopic zinc cadmium sulfide particles over much of the United States and Canada in order to test dispersal patterns and the geographic range of chemical and biological weapons. In September 1950, 6 simulated attacks were conducted upon the San Francisco Bay Area. March to April of 1952, 5 trials off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. 1957, the North Sea, the east coast of Britain. 1953 to the mid-60s, Minnesota locations. Mid-50s, St. Louis, and again a decade later, the Army sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide via motorized blowers atop the Pruitt-Igoe at schools and from the backs of station wagons and via planes. Here's another good one. Operation Geranium was an Army mission that dumped more than 3,000 tons of the chemical agent lewisite into the ocean off the coast of Florida. For those of you who don't know what that is, it is an organoarsenic compound once manufactured in the U.S., Japan, and Germany, and the Soviet Union for use as a chemical weapon. It's a blistering agent and a lung irritant. Isn't that lovely? Geranium was given its name because apparently lewisite has an odor reminiscent of geranium. So well, if it's a lung irritant, I for damn sure am not getting that close to smell it. Back to the insects again, Operation Mayday. This was a series of entomological warfare tests conducted by the U.S. military in Savannah, Georgia in 1956. April to November of 56 to be exact. tests were designed to reveal information about the dispersal of yellow fever mosquitoes in an urban area. The mosquitoes were released from ground level in Savannah, Georgia, and then recovered using traps baited with dry ice. The operation was partially declassified in a U.S. Army report in 1981. Apparently, back in the 50s, the United States government decided the Nazis were onto something good by using insects as a vector. Operation Dropkick was conducted in April and November of 1956 by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps to test the practicality of employing mosquitoes to carry an entomological warfare agent in different ways. The Chemical Corps supposedly released uninfected female mosquitoes into cooperative residential areas of Savannah, Georgia, and then estimated how many mosquitoes entered houses and bit people. Within a day, the mosquitoes had bitten a lot of people. In 1958, the Chemical Corps released 1 million mosquitoes in Avon Park, Florida. These tests showed that the mosquitoes could be spread by means of various devices. There again, the Geneva Convention clearly states you can't develop or test a dispersal unit for a chemical or biological agent. It needs to be rewritten saying you can't use a damn mosquito neither. That is some Nazi shit right there. I'm telling you, folks.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. But there's a man with a gun over there, telling me I've got to beware. I think it's time to stop. Hey, what's that sound? There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds. They're getting so much resistance from behind. Oh, stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs. What's this thing only for outside? I think it's time to stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Paranoia strikes deep. Into your life it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. You step out of line, the man come and take you away. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on. Stop. Hey, what's that sound?
Threw in a little musical interlude there to give you a little time to process everything, and I'll do that every so often. I'm actually trying a new format here. Here's an interesting one. Operation Garden Plot. This was developed by the Department of Defense for Civil Disturbances, also known just as Garden Plot. It was a General Army and National Guard plan to respond to major domestic civil disturbances within the United States. The plan was actually developed in response to the civil disorders and protests of the 1960s and fell under the command and control of the U.S. Northern Command, or NORTHCOM. It provided federal, military, and law enforcement assistance to local governments during major civil disturbances like the Vietnam War protests. Garden Plot Plan was drafted after the Watts riots, New York, and Detroit riots, and captures the acriminous times the document was drawn up. The plot warns against racial unrest, as well as anti-draft and anti-Vietnam elements. The Pentagon activated Garden Plot to restore order after the 1992 Los Angeles riots. Garden Plot was superseded by the U.S. Northcom Concept Plan 2502 following the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States under Homeland Security restructuring, and it has been suggested that similar models be followed. Well, isn't that just precious? I'm going to be honest here and take a moment and break my own rule. I see a lot of civil unrest being at the fault of the government because the longer they keep us at each other's throats, the longer they're going to keep us from noticing all the shady shit they're up to. If you ever noticed about the time shit starts to get real when it comes to government scandals, all of a sudden, pop, there's a crisis. Just something you may want to think about the next time you turn on the news and hear about a train derailment or a factory fire or an explosion or something like that. Maybe take a break and ask yourself, what kind of shit are these bastards pulling now? This one's got a cute and interesting name, Operation Magic Sword. 1965 U.S. military operation designed to test the effectiveness of seaborne released insect vectors for biological agents. Again with the fucking bugs, man. Next up we have Operation Polka Dot, an Army test of biological cluster bombs during the 1950s. Next up, we have Operation Top Hat, and this was a local field exercise conducted by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps in 1953. The exercise involved the use of Chemical Corps personnel to test biological and chemical warfare decontamination methods. These personnel were deliberately exposed to these contaminants as so to test the decontamination. Okie dokie. There's a thought. Let's deliberately expose these poor unsuspecting soldiers to something that could possibly burn their eyes out of their head, fry their brain, fry their organs, kill them, and make them have fucked up children later on, whatever, just so we can practice washing it off of them. One would think they could have used just water and said, poof, this is anthrax. Use water and say, this is this, this is this, this is this, and then go through the decontamination. But no, we got to use the real deal, honestly. Well, we're going to keep going with human testing. Project 112, a biological and chemical weapon experimentation project conducted by the United States Department of Defense from 1962 to 1973, falls right into line with the Vietnam War. So if one of these soldiers involved with this test goes to the VA later with all these strange health issues, the VA can go, no, it was testing, you signed up for that. Meanwhile, this poor dude has been in Vietnam and was gassed by Agent Orange or God knows what else they used, and the VA won't do nothing for him. Go figure. Here's another interesting one. Project SHAD, an acronym for Shipboard Hazard and Defense, was part of the Operation Project 112, which was conducted during the 60s. Project SHAD encompassed test designs to identify U.S. warship vulnerabilities with chemical agents or biological warfare agents, and to develop procedures to respond to such attacks while maintaining a warfighting capability. Okie dokie, if you make all your sailors sick, we ship them out, bring some fresh ones in, we can keep fighting, right? Wrong. Now, if you're going to conduct all these tests, you have to have a place to conduct them, and that would be the Desert Test Center, which was a Army-operated command in charge for testing chemical and biological weapons during the 1960s. The desert was headquartered at Fort Douglas, Utah, which was a former U.S. Army base. Looking at some of these with the test with insects and aerosol dispersal and human testing, it makes me wonder if during World War II the United States wasn't taking notes from the Nazis rather than fighting them. Next up, we have Edgewood Arsenal Human Experiments from 1948 to 1975. The U.S. Army Chemical Corps conducted classified human subject research at the Edgewood Arsenal facility in Maryland. The purpose was to evaluate the impact of low-dose chemical warfare agents on military personnel and to test protective clothing, pharmaceuticals, and vaccines. Most of these are that's their purpose, but a small portion of these studies were directed at psychochemical warfare and grouped under the prosaic title of Medical Research Volunteer Program. The MRVP was also driven by intelligence requirements and the need for new and more effective interrogation techniques. That's your sodium pentothal. For those of you playing the home game, sodium pentothal, we see it in spy movies and cop shows and stuff like that. Sodium pentothal will actually make you tell the truth, or so they say. I've never had it, but, I'd try it. What the hell? Another interesting one that's, as I see it, more Nazi bullshit. Operation Whitecoat, a biodefense medical research program carried out by the United States Army at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Fort Detrick has one of the largest biocontainment units in the United States. I mean, they've got shit in there like smallpox, chickenpox, anthrax, HIV, yellow fever, polio, diseases that have since been eradicated with the advent of vaccinations. And these guys are holding on to it just in case we might need it for something. But between 1954 and 1973, the program pursued medical research using volunteer enlisted personnel who were eventually nicknamed the Whitecoats. These volunteers were all conscientious objectors, which means they were drafted into the military but flat refused to fight, including many members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. All were informed of the purpose and the goals of each project before providing the consent to participate in any project. The stated purpose of the research was to defend troops and civilians against biological weapons. Well, you want to appeal to Christian person's nature, any person's nature for that matter. It's not just limited to Christian or Muslim or whatever your religious faith is. I don't judge. You want to appeal to basic human nature. Well, this is to help everyone else. Yeah, and look what some of them may have got out of it. And last but certainly not least, psychochemical warfare, or drug weapons, involves the use of psychopharmaceutical agents or mind-altering drugs and chemicals with the intention of incapacitating an adversary through temporary induction of hallucinations or deliriums. These agents have generally been considered chemical weapons and more normally constitute a specific type of incapacitating agent. Although never developed into effective weapon systems, a psychochemical warfare theory and research, along with overlapping mind control drug research, was secretly pursued in the mid-20th century by the U.S. military and our favorite alphabet agency, the CIA, in the context of the Cold War. These research programs were ended when they came to light and generated controversy in the 70s. The degree to which the Soviet Union developed or deployed similar agents during the same time period remains largely unknown, so this would be your MK Ultra. And that concludes part 1. I do have a lot more information, but we're going to cover that in part 2. I would like to take a moment to pay tribute to actor Richard Belzer. Richard Belzer passed away February 19th this year, 2023, at his home in the south of France, and he was probably best known as Detective Sergeant John Munch from Law & Order SVU and Homicide: Life on the Streets. He portrayed that character for 23 years. That's a hell of a run. Wrote a couple of books, UFOs, JFK, and Elvis, Conspiracies You Don't Have to Be Crazy to Believe, How to Be a Stand-Up Comic, I Am Not a Cop, I Am Not a Psychic, Dead Wrong, Straight Facts on the Country's Most Controversial Cover-Ups, Hit List, an in-depth investigation in the mysterious deaths of witnesses to the JFK assassination, and Someone is Hiding Something, What Happened to Malaysia Airlines Flights 370. They say Mr. Belzer really loved his animals, and in my world, anybody who loves animals can be a friend of mine with no questions. Because if you treat your dogs and your mama right, you're going to treat people right. That's just how I roll. As I said, when he passed away, when I posted it on my Facebook page, he now has the answers to the questions he asked about JFK. I hope wherever he's at, he is resting peacefully and that he is still doing his stand-up spiel and getting the laughs he so richly deserves. Until we meet again, friends, for part 2, and I'm here to tell you it is some Orwellian Big Brother 1984 shit. But until we meet again, keep your eyes and your mind open, and as always, try to stay out of the darkness.